their environment or also their socialization, right? Anybody else?
I think culture.
Culture, yeah, that plays a big role as well. Yeah, all right answers. Anybody else? Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to talk about, socialization. So let's look at socialization into genders using the symbolic interactionism theory. When we start to think about differences between men and women, it makes sense to start with biological differences. Then we think of gender, or how we express our maleness or femaleness. Sex is biological, right? That's the anatomy that you were born with, where gender is learned through socialization. So basically, as you're growing up, you're usually taught, even before we're born, right? We have baby showers that say for a boy or a girl. And then when we're born, we're put in the pink onesies or the blue onesies, and we get the Barbie dolls or we get the trucks. So pretty much throughout life, we're socialized on what our gender is. Socialization produces behaviors to match a society's idea of what males and females should look like, right? You usually get corrected if you're not acting in accordance with your gender. Gender roles refer to the attitudes and behaviors expected of boys because they're males and expected of girls because they're females. Gender roles are crucial in a child's development. Again, we determine and celebrate a child's gender before they're even born, again, when they are born, and it's reinforced through gender roles through play, dress, and interaction. Sex is what's called a master trait, cutting across all other identities in life. So whether you identify as like for me, I'm Mexican American, I'm a woman, I'm a teacher, right, all these different things. But sex is like a master trait. It's like one of the biggest, like the one that society uses to categorize us, if that makes sense. You know, when you fill out paperwork, it's always like name, date, age, sex. So that's one of the major master traits that we identify people as. So definitions of gender roles have somewhat weakened in recent times, deviating and mixing from traditional gender expectations. So I think it's fair to say that nowadays we're a lot less strict on that than we were like 50, 60 years ago. For instance, as transgender persons, people whose internal gender identity does not match their gender role that society has assigned them based on their sex organs are more accepted in society today. They have also helped to add to changing ideas of masculinity and femininity. So to demonstrate, let's watch Meant to be Maddie on page 255 of the text.
I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
We knew things were different from the time she could walk.
She was wearing her sister's clothes a lot, and we had told her not to do that. She started saying things like, why did God make me a boy and make Grace a girl? She was like 2 and 3, we didn't think much of it.
No, I thought, oh, it's just a phase. She just wants to be like her sister. I didn't really stress over it, but, you know, it's like, oh, I'll be glad when this is over.
Yeah. One time I was getting her ready for bed, she was 4, and she told me that she wanted to cut her penis off. We didn't know how to parent that. We were afraid that she would try to hurt herself. So that's when we started counseling.
One of the biggest difficulties in this type of transition is really you go through a mourning process, mourning the loss of a son. So that caused a bit between us.
I remember telling Maddie too at one point, you know, Mommy knows you're a girl. Mommy knows you're a girl. And Daddy's gonna get there too. Maddie had never once wavered and said, I might be a boy, I might not be a girl. She never wavered.
I distinctly remember going in, the counselor saying, you know, there was no doubt in her mind that she was transgender, that was the beginning of acceptance for me. Okay, I'm not gonna fight this anymore, I'm gonna try to be supportive.
I am interesting, different, and unique.
Once we told her, you can live as a girl, the whole child changed, because she had been depressed and withdrawn.
It made me feel like I was at home somehow, but it was like a different home. It was like home for my brain and my heart.
We sent out a letter to all our friends and family in August before school started for first grade, explaining the situation.
I was a little bit nervous, but my mom came with me on the first day of school. It just felt like I was being true to myself, going to school as a girl.
To me, the hardest part is the constant worry just for her basic safety. I think Maddie has reason to be afraid in our current political climate. It's scarier because people feel like they have a right to say and do whatever they want now.
If everybody was the same in the world, that would just be boring and bleh. You're going on a different path than somebody else. And your road is unique because nobody else goes down that road.
We're just a regular family living in an extraordinary situation. And we love our kids unconditionally, just like anybody else would. I would like for them to grow up in a world where they're not limited by their gender, by who they love, by anything.
I know that it's the right thing. Every day, I know that it's still the right thing.
I am meant to be Maddie. That's my new catchphrase.
Okay, so just a little insight into that. Now we are going to move on to functionalism. So let's look at functionalism to view two theories on the origins of discrimination. If male dominance prevails in pretty much all of societies, how did this come to be? Functionalists developed two theories about this. One, the necessity to survive warfare, and two, a biological need for human reproduction. For instance, in the early days, humans lived in small groups, they fought one another to survive, and they recruited others to join them. Groups developed rewards and punishments. Because men are biologically larger and often stronger than women, they became warriors, and women became the prize for men risking their lives. Women were also used for sexual pleasure and labor. According to our text, the second theory for gender stratification is based on human reproduction. In the early times, women had to give birth to many children because many early people did not live long, right? So it was common to have big families. Carrying children for 9 months Giving birth, nursing, and working with children on their backs all took a physical toll on women. So this further pushed women to work in the home and take on tasks associated with childcare, leaving the men to take the more important and manlier tasks, furthering the division of labor. So today's male dominance stems from those patterns formed in early history. So we're going to switch gears for a minute. I'm going to read you this following paragraph and tell me what country you think that this might refer to. So in this country, women are always under the legal control of a man, either her father or her husband. They cannot vote or testify in court. They can't make legal contracts or hold properties in their own name. Women can work for wages, but they can't spend what they earn, as by law, their paychecks belong to the husband. So can you guys think of any countries where this might be a thing right now? Or maybe not right now, but like at some point in history? Any guesses? Alright, okay, you got right to it. Yeah, so this is a description of women's conditions in the 1800s. So at one point in time, women, you know, now it's more of kind of just a concept, but women really historically have been inferior to men for years, at least from society standards. So with that, we're going to look at conflict and feminist theory and the struggle for equality. So over time, women had to confront the social institutions dominated by men to fight for gender equality. A fact that, again, today is often taken for granted by women. At one point in time here in America, treatment of women was atrocious. Men denied women the right to speak in public. They spat, slapped, tripped them, pelted with burning cigar stubs, and hurled obscenities at them. Suffragists or feminist advocates protested and fought against patriarchy, at times being fined or jailed for their involvement in the right for gender equality. Today, women's rights have come a long, long way, but discrimination still exists in more subtle manners, like the glass ceiling or the conceptual blockage in women's paths to higher positions in the workplace. So, like we said, we've come a long way, but there's still room for more.
You know what came up to mind when she said America is mine? What about the Middle East? Do they still believe that?
Yeah, the Middle East, countries out in the Middle East are even more of a patriarchy than here.
Yeah.
And so, again, it goes back to like their religious and cultural beliefs as well. But yeah, absolutely, that was kind of one that I was looking for somebody to probably say.
Yeah.
Also, some Asian countries are like that as well.
They're very hard on women.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, like you said, their culture is ever going to
Yeah, they
take
just
that
have
off.
different customs and beliefs for women.
They're tough.
Uh-huh. So kind of like the book was saying, with the, what's the word? The story about the Indian women, how they were saying, you know, most Indian women are uneducated, so they're not allowed to get that education. So that's why women are kind of seen more as a burden there.
Do they still let them work? I think they do,
I
right?
think some places do, it just
All right,
depends.
all right.
Yeah, so definitely there's still some places out there. We, here in America, you know, we recognize inequality, but we're also very privileged and fortunate as well. We don't always, like, realize that, you know, myself included. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the research findings. Sociologists have a hard time determining the causes of social differences between males and females because of the nature versus nurture debate, right? So we can see physical differences, that much is apparent, right? We're built differently, we have different anatomy. But with the social differences, it's a little bit more complex to try to uncover those. So sociologists have found that both environmental and biological differences account for various traits. So in everyday life, women find that many men have low regard for their interests, attitudes, and contributions. Again, this is not all men, this is just a pattern of many men. This negative, sometimes demeaning attitude flows from a common view that masculinity represents strength, while femininity is perceived as weakness. About a century ago, leading educators claimed that women's wombs dominated their mental life. Because of this, women were seen as educationally inferior to men, which is contradicted today. But even think about certain words. So, do you guys know what a hysterectomy is for women? A hysterectomy is when they remove the uterus and usually the ovaries as well. But think of that word, hysterectomy. The beginning of that word is like hysteria. What does hysteria mean? Like crazy, right? So it's like even built into the words of certain things like that we don't think about, that goes back to how we view women, right? Like, so as Luke was saying, that we're controlled, that our mentality is controlled by, what did they say, by our wombs. So that was a belief back then, that women are mentally unstable, that they're crazy. And I mean, have things changed? It's still kind of what people say about women, you know? So even in that word, hysterectomy, it's hysteria, right in here, so a little side note. From childhood through adulthood, the mass media helped to shape our ideas about gender by portraying certain actions as right for boys and other actions as right for girls. These messages also influence our ideas about proper sexual relationships and even body images. Mass media influences our views of the self and the world, and our peer groups turn into their enforcing agent. Our peer groups select aspects of the gender messages and ruthlessly enforce their ideas of how we should express those messages. And that's actually where one of our assignments is going to revolve around this week, is the media. All right, so more research findings. When it comes to politics, women are severely underrepresented. Men continue to dominate politics, and socialization continues to influence and reinforce gender stereotypes. However, U.S. politics is undergoing fundamental gender change, with more women coming into politics. In the realm of work, gender discrimination persists. The gender pay gap shows women get paid less than men for doing the same or very similar work. Women also tend to take on the brunt of home responsibilities like cleaning and childcare. Although I will say that's changing. You see more and more men kind of taking over that role as well, so I do want to acknowledge that. Sexual harassment refers to unwanted sexual advances made by someone in power. So when we're talking about the workplace, it's kind of built into the work setting. With women in inferior positions to the bosses, right? Think about MDs, you always have like the big boss and then the woman secretary or receptionist type of thing. So some women may be hired because of their appearance rather than their skill set. When a boss sexually harasses a woman, she has limited options. She can object, ignore, complain, or submit, but each reaction carries its own risk. Now let's move on to talking about the LGBT community. So the term LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. When people whose sexual orientation differs from most, others quietly accept the objective conditions that make them second-class citizens. This results in personal problems. The social institutions of U.S. society presume the norm of heterosexuality, meaning it's more dominant to be straight. A sexual orientation involving an attraction or a preference for people of the opposite sex. So that's like the dominating norm, right? That's the norm. So homosexuality, or being attracted to the same sex, has been seen as deviant in U.S. society. And at some points in history, it was even illegal. A social problem faced by the LGBT community is hate crimes. The term homophobia refers to the dislike or intolerance of homosexuals. Over the years, lesbians and gays have been the victims of violence simply because of their sexual orientation. Hate crimes, such as assault or vandalism, are motivated by dislike or hatred of the victim's race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability, or national origin. So we do see that in crimes throughout history. Now let's apply the conflict theory to these relations. Lesbians and gays have found politics a useful tool to bring about social change in response to discrimination and hate received for their lifestyles. Historically, the LGBT community has used public marching and protesting for legal reform, making impact on national politics. Politicians now strive to target the gay vote, or basically target them to try to make sure that they will vote for that candidate. Civil rights have been prominent issues surrounding social policy, with marriage, equal housing, and employment protections being major wins. Many, especially those with strong religious convictions, continue to view homosexuality as immoral, and discrimination continues toward this community. We're going to switch gears a bit and talk about violence against women. So, fears of rape and murder surround girls and women in this society. They are aware that they can be attacked while on a routine errand or on the way home from school. We know women tend to be victims and men tend to be the rapists and the killers. We also know that the same could be true of women, just not as much. In the family too, females are also disproportionately the victims of abuse, whether by incest or battery by a spouse. Violence against women is a form of power and control. Some men use violence to gain or maintain their dominance, control, or authority over their wives and children. Violence is a way of keeping those less powerful family members in line. Sociologists also use symbolic interactionism to understand gendered violence. Both boys and girls are surrounded by men in positions of power. As they see men dominate society, they learn to associate power with dominance and masculinity. Weakness then becomes equated with femininity. As boys and men come to judge themselves in these terms, for some, violence becomes a way to assert dominance and power. So we're going to examine this a little bit more by watching a candid conversation. So,
I get sick of feeling unsafe all the time, whereas a lot of men don't have that issue.
As a woman, it's just the amount of fear, the amount of bandwidth that I feel like it takes up. It's hard to even let your guard down.
America definitely has a problem with sexual violence. It seems to be just ingrained in the DNA of the country.
I definitely have like safety precautions if I'm walking alone.
I don't tie my hair up because that's an easy way for somebody to attack you and grab you by your ponytail.
If you're going out at night, you know, you want to have the buddy system.
Don't wear these clothes because it looks like you're asking for it.
This is just how it is. I have to be careful walking home alone at night. If I can walk home alone at night at all. And that's not because I did anything, it's because I am a woman.
I was sexually assaulted in my freshman year of college.
I remember it happening, but being unconscious of what was really truly going on.
He started kissing me and I kept shoving him, and then eventually he pinned my hands out. He's a lot bigger than me. And I was screaming, and he didn't stop.
I fought him off, and it was terrifying.
After that, he had this stupid smirk on his face, zipped up and walked away.
I was taught to think that that rape, you know, happens in a dark alleyway, like it is a violent crime, and like, you know, as long as you don't do that, you're fine.
Most people who report rape in one way or another, it's from someone they actually knew.
I don't think everyone has the same definition.
Because you know when you're over the line. Getting close to the line is where it's blurry. That part is hard to define.
I would say anything done without the other person's explicit consent. And explicit consent, enthusiastic consent.
I don't think that it's a guarantee that men will be raised to recognize at all what sexual assault is.
I can think of at least 20 people who could conceivably accuse me of sexual harassment or even misconduct or assault. And were they to bring it up, I would not be able to deny that.
And looking back at what I have done, as opposed to what I thought I was doing, was I a monster?
Like, I feel like I wasn't taught, like, I was sexually active before I started, like, learning about consent.
My first instinct was to go home and not think about it. I mean, I just assumed that I was wrong, like no one would believe me.
I didn't even think that I could get, that there was any point to my saying anything. What was it gonna get me? The guy would just deny it.
People are always questioning the woman and why were you there? Well, what did you say to him? Well, how did it start?
I felt like it was my fault. I got drunk, you know?
That was the first place I went, where I went wrong, what could I have done to make it not happen? You know, why did I let this happen?
Humiliation. That we caused it. That it's our fault. That we're bad people because that happened to us.
It's something that takes over your life and you never forget it. I'm 69 years old and I still haven't forgotten it or been healed from it. You know, it's just something that's a part of you.
That's crazy. Why? I didn't even know that was even a thing. That's crazy. 15 out of 16 walk free?
None of the men that did anything to me, there's never been any repercussions at all.
No, nothing happened to him, no. More people are speaking out, so that's like, oh, it's a problem, yeah, that's been a problem, you know?
As women, we're all trying to like make the movement happen, but you know, when will men start being more accountable for the other men?
Well, I don't think a lot has changed. I mean, the women are talking about it, but the men are still raping us. What has changed is that the hearts of women have changed. More defiant and taking a place in our culture and our society.
All right, so now let's move into social policy in the future. So as with any controversial subject, you always have kind of three different directions you can go in with policy. We have the radical extremists, we have the conservative extremists, and then like somewhere in the middle. So we're going to talk about all of those, okay? So people want social policies that match their views of what is right or how they think things should be in life. But in our large, diverse society, people come from many backgrounds. With these vastly contrasting views, there is usually little agreement on social policy. Discrimination is so rooted in society, say the radical extremists, that the only way to get rid of it is to restructure society. Because the roots of sexism reach back into childhood socialization, To succeed, we would need to remove distinctions between boys and girls. So again, this is an extremist point of view, okay? Such extreme social policies are not plausible in our society unless we were to have a dictator to enforce them. This means to eliminate sexism is not likely to ever be achieved. The social policies preferred by the conservative extremists are remarkably different. They believe gender distinctions of boys and girls and men and women are not only natural, but that they should be encouraged. They argue that a woman's natural and proper role is that of a homemaking wife and mother. A man's natural and proper role is that of breadwinning husband and father. Social policy, they stress, should support these basic gender distinctions. They should encourage girls to become full-time wives and mothers, and boys to be the protectors and primary source of financial support of their wives and children. Again, without a dictator, these social policies are not plausible in our diverse society. And these goals, too, are not likely to ever be achieved. So yeah, too much of anything in either direction is just, it's not going to happen in a diverse society. So many positions fall between these two extremes. Middle-of-the-road policies are policies that would reduce or end the gender pay gap, the right for both the mother and father to take extended leaves from work when a child is born or sick, protection of sexual minorities from discrimination. So sexual minorities are gays, lesbians, anybody who's not straight. Tough enforcement of court-ordered child support, and at home, more child care by fathers and more equitable distribution of housework. So that's somewhere in the middle of these policies. And lastly, let's look at the future of the problem. The future of the problem continues to work towards positive change. Controversy will continue over sexual minorities, especially those that hold positions mentoring youth. Disagreement between those who favor the full civil rights of sexual minorities and those who have moral objections to their activities will continue. It is likely that this issue will be decided in favor of greater freedom of sexual participation, of social participation by sexual minorities. As women continue to join the paid workforce, power relationships between women and men at work will continue to shift towards greater equality. Equal pay will remain an issue, but it is likely that we'll gradually inch forward. As more women earn paychecks, and as the size of those paychecks increases, relationships between husbands and wives will continue to shift. The primary force that is changing gender stereotypes comes from the vast number of women who are in the workforce. As gender roles that push us into activities dictated by our cultural bend, stereotypes will break, and we will see fundamental change in both self-perception and in gender relationships. More equal and varied gender roles will free both men and women to do activities that are compatible with their personal preferences. As activities become more gender neutral, a man and woman will develop a new consciousness of who they are and of their own potential. And that is it. Any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, move right along. So that was our lecture for the week. So how many people in here are following the political candidates? Anybody? Kind of, okay. So I was trying to find a video to kind of talk more about the gender gap. So let's watch this video and then talk a little bit about gender and the presidential race that's a few days away, actually, if you guys think about it.
Welcome back in. Now turning to what could be some defining issues of the 2024 election. Starting with the gender gap with some divide between male and female voters, and the focus also on reproductive rights. NBC's Hallie Jackson has more on national politics.
This election cycle, the 30-point gender gap between men
I feel things were a little better under Trump.
and women is stark.
We're ready for a female president.
With NBC News polling showing women supporting Vice President Harris by a 14-point margin, former President Trump with a 16-point lead among men, a gap that could be even bigger than 2016, when the first woman nominee of a major party, Hillary Clinton, was on the ballot. Mr. Trump courting men under 30, appearing on podcasts with male-dominated audiences.
You want a drink? I'm okay.
Trump surrogates leaning into the hyper-masculine. Hulk Hogan ripping off his shirt at the RNC. Tucker Carlson colorfully and crudely casting Mr. Trump as a father figure.
When Dad gets home, you know what he says? You've been a bad girl. You've been a bad little girl and you're getting a vigorous spanking.
Even Mr. Trump's language aimed at women, nodding to traditional gender roles.
And I will protect women at a level never seen before.
Vice President Harris also reaching out to men, appearing on a popular NBA podcast and launching ads on sports betting sites. But boosting turnout among women could be key for her, like the younger women who tune into Alex Cooper's popular Call Her Daddy podcast.
People really want to know they're seen and heard.
And while the campaign sees abortion access as mobilizing across gender lines, our polling shows it's the top single voting issue for women, and the vice president is the clear leader among college-educated white women who back her by 28 points in our NBC News poll, although the VP herself has downplayed the impact of the gender gap.
Regardless of someone's gender, they want to know that their president has a plan to lower costs, that their president has a plan to secure America.
It's firefighters, nurses, teachers. It's our families who are getting pushed out.
Oh, that was it, sorry, it was 2 minutes. So, I guess my question to you guys is, what role?
Real.
Oh,
It's facing a lot of comments like this.
That is so.
sorry, that's a different video. What role do you guys think, if any, that gender has in this political arena that we're in? Do you think that, because there's also the racial undertone, but let's talk about the gender undertone. Do you think, or I'm sorry, what role do you think it has in, like, the campaigning, like, what people are, information that's being put out there, how that is differently affecting men and women, just anything you guys are thinking about that? Like, I mean, the video is obviously talking about, you know, these people are, this candidate is focused on male, this candidate is focused on female, but she's also trying to get the male. It's like, what do you guys think about that? Because I feel like with this presidential election, that there's a lot of examples that we're talking about in our book. So if that helps you, kind of, did you have something?
I feel like it plays a very important part, especially in today's society, since like there's a lot of like with LGBT and like women's rights and like everybody wanting like their own separate like right for like abortion and like everything, including in that. I feel like it's like a very big topic and like it can have a negative or a massive impact whether or not like the two candidates or whether Kamala wins or whether Trump wins. Like each one has its benefits, but it's downplayed in society. It for sure plays like a massive impact, which is important for like, I feel like everybody should vote and like put in their chance. So like, I feel like so we can have like a better structure for government and like more rights for everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, I like that. Anybody else, what role do you guys think gender has on any aspect of this? Do you think, I mean, I don't wanna, it's always hard in politics, because it's like, I don't wanna say how I feel, I wanna hear how you guys feel. So, do you guys feel that, okay, let me rephrase this. Do you see any gender inequality in the way that the candidates are representing one another, or in like public perception of them, or the way the media is presenting them? Do you guys see any of that? Do you guys have any, do you think that's influencing people's opinions, or like just, what do you guys think about that?
I feel like with Kamala, I feel like she's like, one of the reasons why she's trying to focus more like on like the women audience is like probably like no, in Mexico, they just brought the first female president too. Something I hear about too is that, Mexico has the first female president, there's a chance Kamala could be the first one, and then, that's the reason to vote for her. And then, what I've also heard is about how, with Trump, how he's not for, the abortion rights and all that, and then I guess that Kamala is, and that's another thing I see that's, the main reason that people want to go for her.
Yeah, as we saw in the video, right? Yeah, definitely. So I think they're both reaching out to certain audiences, I guess you could say, gendered audiences. So just something to think about. And I mean, regardless of who wins, and we can have more of a conversation on it when we get to the chapter on government, because I think we have a chapter on that. But yeah, it was just something to kind of demonstrate what we were talking about. So I'm going to play this other video, and it's 10 minutes long, and it's a TED Talk about gender roles in society. And then we'll transition into talking about the assignments after this one, okay?
Shout out adjectives you associate with men. Describe the ideal man.
Okay, let's do this real quick. So you don't have to shout, but what are adjectives that you associate with the ideal man, or manly? Just what comes to your mind first? For me, it was strong. That was the first word that popped out of my head. Anybody else?
Oh, can we say something?
What was it?
Can we say something?
Yeah, feel free. You're all the best. I'm just kidding.
I feel like gentleness.
Gentleness, okay. Anybody else?
I feel strong.
Strong. Okay, let's see what they say.
Hard. Beard.
Dirty. Now do the same thing for women. Describe the person.
Okay, let's do that too. So women. I always think of dainty, even though not all women are dainty. But that's just the first thing that comes in my head. Or what's the other word? I can't even think of the word. What do you call it? You might break. Fragile. And as a woman, that's the first thing that comes to my head. I'm not fragile, but that's what society has ingrained in me. Anybody else? Sassy. Sassy. Okay. Anybody else? No right or wrong answers. I promise. Another one that popped in my head was bossy. I'll be honest.
Sensitive.
Sensitive. Okay. And you guys,
Caring.
you won't get offended.
Caring.
Expressive.
Maybe argumentative.
Argumentative, okay.
Sensitive.
Sensitive. I think of nurturing too.
Yeah.
Let's see what they say.
Pretty.
I mean, it's kind of hard to
Fabulous.
There are certain things that we associate with being either masculine or feminine. And for things like colors or styles of hair or clothing, this seems harmless. But a study conducted by Princeton University demonstrates that in reality, the extent of these associations is much further and has a much heavier impact than it seems. The study shows how we associate certain adjectives and attributes with being either masculine or feminine. This creates set rules and ideas in our minds which contribute to gender roles and stereotypes. These influence how people think, speak, and interact with others on a daily basis. This leads to a myriad of other effects, one of the most notable being the stereotype threat. The stereotype threat affects people who are expected to perform poorly. It's the fear of proving stereotypes about yourself correct. Us humans are affected by how other people perceive us, and the stereotype threat plays on that. The University of Chicago investigated the stereotype threat, and they found that the stereotype threat occupies working memory space in your brain. What this means is that when you're given a task that's associated with stereotypes that are associated with you, the stereotype threat takes up working memory space in your brain, leaving less available to actually complete the task at hand. The result is lower performance, therefore proving the stereotype true. Stanford University looked into this even further. What they did was they found out that on the SAT in the math portion, women on average scored 20 points lower because of the stereotype threat. Experts believe that the cause of this is when you're asked to indicate your gender before beginning. What this does is it brings to mind all of the negative implications of stereotypes associated with youth, thus leading women to believe that they won't be able to perform as well in the math section. The University of Washington looked into this even further. What they did was they took 2 classes of high schoolers and gave them an identical math test. The first class, the students were told that boys were normally better at math than girls. In the second class, the students were told to disregard any stereotypes they heard about one gender being better than the other at math. In the first class, the girls scored an average of 12.5. In the second, they scored an average of 15. When we eliminate stereotypes, we can increase performance. Women in engineering or driving or other male-dominated fields can perform so much better if they weren't constantly having to prove their worth as a woman. These gender stereotypes and roles also lead to gender imbalances in industries, one being nursing. An idea of what a woman should be has developed. Women are expected to be warm, kind, caring, and clean. These attributes also happen to be necessary for nursing and explain why less than 10% of nurses are male. Advertising is another thing that contributes to these roles. Florence Nightingale promoted nursing as a field for women, hence the lack of men. Nursing has become such an inherently feminine costume that it's the 8th most popular Halloween costume for females in the United States. We can eliminate gender imbalance when we promote equality.
Hey, I'm Cece. Come on, take a seat. First, be pretty cool. Then we up the AC to 78.
Computer science is another field that's dominated by men. By a show of hands, how many of you guys play video games at least once a week for an hour? Computer science may be a male-dominated field right now, but this wasn't always the case. Women were pioneers of the field. Grace Hopper was seen as one of the first compilers of computer programming language, and Ada Lovelace was seen as one of the first computer programmers. They were pioneers. The gender imbalances began in the 1980s. The number of women in the workforce is rapidly increasing, but computer science went the other way. And the root of this is said to be in gender roles emphasized through advertising. Early home computers were advertised to little boys by other boys, said to be a great platform to play video games on. They often appeared in places geared for boys, like a game store. Like Tonka trucks, incredibly popular toy cars advertised for little boys, they appeared in homes for one gender to play with. This gave boys experience with computers, giving them an advantage over girls